Breaking news today. Washington insiders, previously proponents of endless wars, now assert that President Trump is uninformed about our nuclear navy. But is this genuinely about national security, or is it more about preserving their own power? Stay with us for more.
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
CNN reports that John Bolton has criticized President Trump's understanding of our nuclear navy. Consider the source. John Bolton, a career bureaucrat known for his role in disastrous wars and a favorite of the Washington establishment, now claims that the real threat to American security isn't the Russian hypersonic missiles near NATO, but a president who challenges the status quo. Why do so-called experts always question the competence of outsiders who challenge the permanent war crowd? Perhaps it's not about national security, but about maintaining power and control, keeping the same failed leaders in charge. Recall the previous administration's endless interventions, open borders, and a foreign policy that prioritized global interests over American families. Did these policies enhance our safety? President Trump's strategy is notably different. He prioritizes America, questions reckless military escalations, and resists letting unelected officials lead us into more foreign conflicts. When Bolton and his media allies criticize this approach, one must wonder whose interests they are truly defending. After all, the experts often lecturing us about nuclear strategy are the same ones who avoid the consequences of their mistakes. Let the show begin.
I hope somebody from the Pentagon who understands the disposition of the nuclear force explains this to Trump at some stage. And as I said, while the ballistic missile submarines are core to our second strike capability, they are also perfectly capable of being part of a first strike on Russia.
For decades, the Pentagon's nuclear force posture has relied on a robust, survivable second strike capability. Ballistic missile submarines, far from being Cold War relics, serve as a dynamic insurance policy against any adversary contemplating a first strike on the United States. These submarines patrol undetected, ready to respond if America is ever attacked, maintaining peace not through saber rattling but through a quiet assurance of strength. Critics of the current administration's nuclear strategy often overlook their own flawed record on nuclear policy and global stability. They have advocated for prolonged conflicts, mishandled arms control, and left us in a world where China and Russia are escalating their military capabilities. Yet when decisive actions are taken to reinforce America's deterrence, these same detractors accuse us of lacking transparency and being overly aggressive. The Pentagon is modernizing the nuclear triad, submarines, bombers, and missiles, to address the escalating threats. While some in Washington prefer grandstanding or dragging us into foreign conflicts, the American people prioritize a defense policy that ensures their safety and upholds national interests over globalist agendas or the interests of the military-industrial complex. This means maintaining a credible deterrent, ensuring our submarines remain stealthy and effective, and clearly communicating that aggression against us will have consequences. It is revealing that the most vocal critics of this administration's nuclear policy are those who failed to deter Russian aggression in Ukraine and allowed China to escalate its nuclear capabilities. Rather than heeding their lectures, we should support a defense strategy that is strong, clear, and centered on American interests. This strategy should focus on preventing nation building and endless wars, advocating instead for a modern, effective deterrent that secures our nation.
I believe today, the president said he was going right after he left Gaza. The last visit that Witkoff made to Russia did not result in any concrete changes. Obviously, the war is still raging in Ukraine. Do you expect a different outcome this time, potentially?
No one should be surprised that yet another diplomatic mission to Moscow has failed to yield meaningful results. For years, under the Biden-Harris administration, the U.S. pursued photo ops and empty summits while Russia expanded its influence and Ukraine bore the brunt. Despite multiple trips by envoys like Steve Witkoff, the war in Ukraine continues. Russian missiles still target civilians, and Moscow shows no real interest in compromise. This is the consequence of American foreign policy driven by globalist ideals and a naive belief in endless dialogue with adversaries who respect only strength. The previous administration's focus on multilateralism only emboldened Putin to escalate the situation, leaving the current administration to address the fallout. Now, the White House is setting firm boundaries, imposing stricter deadlines, threatening tangible economic repercussions, and protecting American interests more assertively. The bipartisan establishment in Washington still advocates for increased involvement and more financial aid to Ukraine, even as our own borders remain vulnerable and our economy suffers from excessive spending. Americans are growing weary of international policing at the expense of domestic stability and the erosion of our freedoms. It's time to prioritize America by demanding accountability from our allies, ending open-ended commitments, and curtailing the influence of the military-industrial complex on our foreign policy. The partisan divide is stark, Republicans advocate for strength through deterrence and meaningful use, while Democrats continue to rely on outdated strategies. Expecting a different outcome from more shuttle diplomacy is unrealistic, unless there's a significant shift in approach. True peace can only be achieved through practical realism, not wishful thinking or endless negotiations with those unwilling to change.
Yeah, serious.
It probably feeds the Russian disinformation plan because it raises the temperature, scares people that there might be a nuclear, and that's what Russia's been trying to do all along, is scare people about nuclear. No, if you want an effective response, you push the weapons into Ukraine, and instead they've been slowed to a trickle. So, this is just rhetoric, but it's rhetoric that he may think it makes him look strong and tough in front of some supporters, but actually it works against us and in favor of Russia. Well, I think Medvedev is a provocateur operating on Mr. Putin's instructions. And I think it's a long series of these statements designed to intimidate the West, to not help us to rationalize not supporting Ukraine.
CNN's coverage of the recent nuclear standoff between the United States and Russia, focusing on Medvedev's rhetoric and the White House's response, showcases a pattern of emphasizing establishment viewpoints and neglecting the broader strategic context. The network suggests that American nuclear signaling merely escalates tensions and plays into Russian disinformation strategies. This perspective lacks balance and historical insight. The network's frequent use of former officials like John Bolton for expert commentary is problematic. While Bolton's understanding of nuclear deterrence is acknowledged, his history of supporting failed interventionist policies that entangled America in prolonged conflicts and damaged its global credibility is often overlooked. CNN presents these opinions as objective facts, ignoring the experts' potential biases and interests in maintaining the status quo. This approach compromises the network's objectivity and offers a skewed perspective that resists deviation from established tactics. Also, CNN's fact-checking is inadequate. Their claims that announcing submarine deployments compromises security overlook the necessity of strategic ambiguity and visible deterrence. These are crucial, especially when diplomatic efforts falter and Russia intensifies its aggressive actions. The network's selective criticism of transparency ignores the previous administration's secretive strategies, which only encouraged Moscow and Beijing to enhance their military capabilities and challenge Western resolve. In terms of balance, CNN's panel discussions predominantly feature former Democratic officials and interventionist Republicans, all echoing the same sentiments. More military aid to Ukraine, increased American involvement, This leaves us with so many things to consider. Establishment figures often lecture us on expertise and experience, yet the real fear is losing control to those who challenge their authority. These so-called experts, who previously entangled us in endless conflicts, now criticize President Trump's understanding of our nuclear navy. Their concern isn't national security. It's about preserving their own power. The previous administration, led by Biden and Harris, resulted in international turmoil and domestic instability. Now with the current administration, we see leadership that prioritizes America's interest and steers clear of globalist agendas. Consider this. Who truly benefits when these experts are never held accountable? Leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe. That's all for now.